For me, history is really interesting because I love the research. I love the eureka moment when you find something. When you discover something that's just like surprises you or just opens your eyes to something, to me, there's almost no better feeling in the world. It's almost like, I don't know, getting the jump shot just perfect if you're a basketball player. My son's in basketball right now. He's trying to work on his dunks, which he's able to do, but he's trying to do like a windmill dunk now. And just see the excitement in his face when he's able to do something and accomplish something after working for it. It's the greatest thing ever as a father, right? But, I'm not really into sports. I do love history, though. I'm a big history nerd. So for me, those kind of moments come along when I discover something through my research, and then I can apply it in some way or another. Now, something's been stumbling me as we wrap up January's challenges. On the Campcrafters Guild, we have all these monthly challenges. Well, starting this year, I'm actually doing weekly challenges. So by the end of the year, if you follow along with these videos, if you follow along with the challenges on the Guild, then you will have a complete kit for whatever outdoor adventure style you're into, whether it be modern, whether it be historical, bushcrafting, or backpacking, ultralight, whatever it is. Because there's certain things that are just common. The only difference is like the type of gear, I guess, that you use. And that's one of the things that really drew me into early 20th century camping. I have all this experience as a scout camping, and I learned a lot through that process. And then I got into Civil War reenacting, and I learned a lot more through that process. And, it goes back and forth. Well, now I'm building my 18th century impression for the 250th anniversary of our country's birth. My son and I, we're building this kit. So I'm going through this whole process with you, and I'm running into some stumbling blocks because in the 18th century, they didn't have photos. And your average person just didn't write down certain things. Most of your population couldn't even really read and write. So it was only the upper middle class and the wealthy that really had paintings taken of them or letters writing out, whatever it is. And often case, it's the wealthy material culture that survives. It's not the lower class, the regular person. So we're left to assume certain things and make educated guesses based on what we know. So I love finding primary sources. I tell my students, when you start your research, always try to start with finding primary sources because that's going to be the best, right? And then move on to secondary sources if you need to. For my primary sources, I'm trying to look up diaries and letters and memoirs. And since I'm representing a Delaware soldier, I thought, well, surely there's got to be some type of memoir out there about Delaware soldiers. And I found several. And I've read, the ones that I could find. And nowhere on there does it really talk about the details of clothing. I remember when I was doing my deep dive research into medical civil reenacting, I did the same process. I went to the memoirs. And even those surgeons would often give you little tidbits about, their day-to-day lives. That's not the case in what I'm finding with these 18th century memoirs so far about the war. Really, they're covering the movements of military bodies and really not giving any type of personal details about their clothing, their sleeping arrangements, their frustrations, or what have you. It's very much factual. And I find that kind of interesting and kind of odd at the same time. But anyhow, as you can see, today's topic is all about your water barrier, your moisture barrier, your ground cloth, your footprint, whatever you want to call it. Humans, we have this love-hate relationship with water. We're constantly battling water, but we also constantly need water to survive, right? So the last part of our bedroll system, our sleeping system, is a footprint, right? You should always have some type of moisture barrier between you and the ground. Now, if you're a hammock camper, you don't have to worry about that so much, right? But at the same time, you're probably going to have some type of wet water gear, like a poncho. Now, if you're a modern camper, this could actually be two in the same. In fact, you can go to a dollar store, you get yourself a plastic tarp really cheap for like $5, and that would count. That's your moisture barrier, and you can rig it up kind of like what I've got going on right now, and you have yourself a make-do poncho. Now, I'm going to start going with what we know today, some modern conveniences, and try to get in the mind of an 18th century soldier, because like I said, I couldn't find a whole lot of information about ponchos or a footprint for soldiers, and they certainly weren't issued to your colonial soldier. So anyhow, what I have here, this is the One Wind poncho one-man shelter, emergency shelter. This thing is huge. I'm 6'1", and if I put this on me as a poncho, it goes down almost all the way to my feet, right? And I can set this up as a shelter, and it works out wonderfully. It's got zippers. I love this thing, and I did a video on this, so if you're really interested in like the deep dive, but this thing is really cool. I'm not like a survivalist, but I do take this when I go backpacking now, because it is a poncho. It's very large, very airy. I can move around it. It's also super lightweight. And when you're trekking for a long period of time, having something lightweight is really nice. But also, having something that can do dual duty, which is what I'm trying to think about, because humans, we really haven't changed a whole lot. We still have the same needs. We still have the same desires and the same problems and the same loves and dislikes, etc., as our forefathers had. So this dual duty shelter is very reminiscent of the Civil War poncho that I'm wearing right now. I guess this is the gum blanket. This isn't the poncho. And as you'll notice, it comes down, and on my backside, it hits right below my butt. Okay, so that leaves my legs exposed. Now on my front side, it goes all the way down to where not my natural waist, the belly button, but actually lower, so right above your crotch area. And I can move freely about. Now, it has some other grommets that I could tie together, or I could put together. I still have plenty of space to move my arms in and out. Now this is what the soldiers would carry and either use for a make-do shelter, or they would use this as a moisture barrier between the ground and where they sleep, or they would use it, like what I'm using it right now, as wet weather gear. Now, as a soldier, you got to be able to move your arms, right? You got to be able to react accordingly. You're going to get wet, but it's at least going to limit the amount of wet that you get, especially in your core area. The core area is really where you want protected. Your legs, sure, you can get uncomfortable and everything, but remember, your heart and your chest and everything, especially during cold weather gear or cold weather season, that's what you gotta keep warm. That way the blood flow keeps moving and everything else will feel warm if your core feels warm. And that's kind of what this does. It covers the most essential part of your body, leaves the rest of it exposed. So then you have to rely on your other gear to kind of make up for that loss. All right? So very reminiscent to this, just not as big. And what's nice is it has the dual duty. Now I'm thinking this is probably what soldiers would have as well. Now, during my research, because I was running into a stumbling block, I was like, well, surely people who had to work outside, the common working man, had to have something to keep from getting wet. So, looking for primary sources, I looked up fishermen and seamen. Because a lot of these 13 original colonies, they're right there on the coast. They have this relationship with the ocean that most people in the world today really just don't have experience with. If you're on a ship, you need to have some type of wet weather gear. You can't just go out there in wool during a blasting storm or hurricane and expect to not get completely drenched. Okay, so upon my research in that, took me down just a small rabbit hole. I learned about oilcloth, which honestly, I forgot that I remembered it. I forgot that I learned it a couple years ago. So I ran into two videos rather quickly that I've seen before, because you know how the algorithm just kind of spits back something that you're already familiar with. So Townsend, about 7 years ago, did a video on oilcloth, and so did this young lady named V. Birchwood. Now, I suggest that you watch both of those videos, especially the V. Birchwood, because she does a great job explaining and expanding on the history of what oilcloth really is. Townsend does a good job of just kind of briefly glazing over it, but showing you how to make oilcloth. So both of them, fantastic sources. And it reminds me also, during the Civil War, because having a rubberized gun blanket was pretty difficult to come by, especially to outfit as many men as they had. And even during the Confederacy, they weren't really able to get so many gun blankets for their soldiers. So instead, they went to painted blankets, painted oilcloth. And I felt like an idiot right away, right? So all it really is it's just cloth, and it is painted with a mixture of linseed oil and a pigment of some sort. So that's all this is. Now, you could just go and get yourself some latex paint or oil-based paint, and you could put it on a cloth, and you pretty much got the same exact thing. That would be actually healthier than the historical process of doing it. So for my experiment, because I do want to make this somewhat authentic, I'm trying to go about this the right way. And I keep telling you guys that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get into camping. There's a guy on the Campcrafters Guild who I feel bad for because he's just so overwhelmed. He sees everything that people are sharing and they're using, and we're all at different stages on this journey together, and he just feels so overwhelmed because he's like, man, this is going to cost so much money. It really doesn't have to. Like I said, if you're into modern camping, you can just go to a dollar store and get yourself a plastic tarp, and you got yourself this piece of kit, and it's like $5, maybe a little less, right? And you only need it big enough to cover your body essentially, or where your tent is going to be, where you're going to lay. And I've also told you, go to your big box store, get yourself some painter's cloth. So I've got several of these laying around from years of painting my house and stuff. So I'm going to experiment with this. I keep telling you guys to do this. Now I can see light. There is some holes. This is a light canvas. This is not a sailcloth. This is not a heavy canvas whatsoever. So painter's tarp is meant to be lightweight, but fairly repellent of paint. But I can guarantee you, from looking at various paint spots on my processes here, that it still can leak through, like what you see there. So we got to fill those holes if we're going to make this thing truly a nice moisture barrier. So to do that, I'm thinking we're going to have some type of pigment to put into it. And I'm thinking like an iron oxide, because that was a common pigment. So it would either turn out to be rusty red, or I could do like an iron gall, which is like a black. So, but to starting out with, I already had my mineral spirits because I'm a woodworker by hobby. So I already have this. So then I went to my big box store yesterday and I got myself some boiled linseed oil. Now this process is pretty simple. All you have to do is just do a 1-to-1 ratio. You mix it up and you put it on the cloth. So I am going to do this mixture without pigment at first. And this is going to take a little while to dry, and see what we can do to make this waterproof without pigment. So I'm going to do like a 6x6 square and paint that roughly, and we'll see how it does. Now this, like I said, it's going to take a while to dry if I'm not prepared to show you today what this process is going to look like. So this is going to be an ongoing project that I will share with you in the next several videos. And there's more to this that we're going to do as well, because I want to make it so that I can tie this together into a cape. Now, they didn't have iron grommets like what we have today. Instead, they would sew their grommets. So I'm going to practice another skill that I've done a little bit before. It's not one of my favorite things to do, but I'm going to show you guys along this process how to sew a grommet. All right, just like they did in the 18th century. So this will be a fun little project. And I just want it large enough for where I'm going to lay. But it'll also be big enough that I can throw over my shoulders like so and use it in this way. Now we know from the 18th century that they had capes. Okay, that's pretty much what this is. And we also have to include common sense. Now, historical reenactors sometimes wince at this idea of common sense. Like, yeah, but do you really have a true source? So I understand that fear, but at the same time, common sense is extremely valuable and underrated when we think about human activities and human behaviors and what they've done in the past. So there you go. I'm going to paint this up, and I'm going to show you how the first layer is with some water on it. We'll see how it does, and we'll keep adding to it maybe 3 times. And if it doesn't repel water very well and after the 3rd application, then I'll probably go ahead and proceed with the pigment. So I hope you like this video. Now, like I said before, and I've alluded to, we've got these challenges. It's on the Campcrafters Guild. You can join for free. There's a paid side to it where you get some extra benefits, but there's the free side. All you have to do is just go to www.honorableoutfitters.com/join the guild and participate in these weekly challenges and share and see what other people are posting on there. Every week we got a challenge. So for February, we've got a whole other set of challenges, starting off with first aid kits, which I'm already thinking in the 18th century, they really didn't have first aid kits. So I'm trying to do some research on what basic things a soldier or a common person may carry with them for long term to self-medicate if they need, or to handle whatever cuts, bumps, and bruises they might get along the way, you know? And I've got a really cool new early 20th century artifact to show you as well. Yeah? So check out the Campcrafters Guild. It'll be a lot of fun. And if you're not already signed up, in the description box below, there's a link to purchase and secure your own Preston Mess Kit. We are counting down the days now. There's only so many of these that are getting produced. I don't know if there's going to be a second run. We shall see. But they're $175. And what you get is you get a 54-ounce canteen made out of 316L stainless steel, so it's good for high temp. You get your cup/pot that all comes together and folds down, fits nicely in there. You also get your skillet, like so, and plate, which comes together to form a container or a little baking device. And it's clever because it's got a little locking mechanism to make sure that it doesn't just pop out. So, as you can see right there. So Sarge Vining over at Bannerman's, he and I are pretty good friends. I sent him the carrying bags for him to take a look at because he's wanting to reproduce them for you. So a lot of people are asking about where you can go to buy it. And I tried working with a vendor in West Virginia. That didn't pan out. I reached out to Frost River, couldn't get through to him. So Sarge Vining is taking it on himself to make 2 types of versions. One's going to be pretty expensive if you want a true reproduction because of everything that's involved. He says it's going to be pretty spendy. He's still working out the details on it, but just the amount of detail in itself is going to cost quite a bit. But he also has a common man bag that he is producing for much less, and he's going to be putting that on his site, Vico Outfitters. And in return for me giving him the bags and everything, he's the one who's coming out with the, he's sending me. And in return, he's sending me not the patterns, because we don't want to call it the patterns per se, but he's sending me on PDF the versions that you guys can use to print out. You guys can cut out your cloth yourself, and with some knowledge of sewing, you can piece together your own bags. So you can save money that way if you're more of a do-it-yourselfer and you're able to figure things out, you know how to sew. Or if you don't want to deal with that, you can go to Sarge Vining at Vico Outfitters. And as soon as he's got a couple mocked up, he's going to put it on his website out there. If you like this video, please click like. We appreciate it. It helps other people find the video, and it means a lot to us. If you'd like to see the video about the Preston Mess Kit to go a little bit more in depth, then check out this playlist over here. These are all the Preston Mess Kit videos showing you what you can do with baking and breaking it down and stuff. And if you'd like to see my playlist of historical Campcraft gear, then check it out here. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Give a kiss and hug to your loved ones, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.